Well, Kitty, would you come on up, and your assistant? No triplets. Now I asked Kitty to help us out with some of this history, and she's going to be great, right?
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. Our family's history does start when my mom, Doris Prevette Coots, was 9 years old in grammar school. And my sisters and I grew up hearing all about she was never raising her hand. So she always pointed out the little service station where Meadowview started. The first baptism was in January of 1945, 2 months after 75 people had walked to church that Sunday. 7 years later, my mom and dad were the first couple to be married at Meadowview. Oh, okay, I see you got my pictures there. So, and then 50 years later, they were the first couple to have their 50th anniversary here at Meadowview. At least 3 of those charter family members still have 4th and 5th generations that are attending. The Owen, the Curry, and the Prevette families. And many of those people actually met their spouse here at Meadowview. Growing up, I was always taught about God and how He loves me and sent His Son to die for my sins. We had what was called a wordless book. It was, you remember those? Just cardboard. The black represents your sin, the red is the blood, the white is your cleansed from sin, and the gold was the streets of gold. Remember Granddaddy walking through the woods to start the fires? That was always a treat after church for my cousins and myself and my sisters to get to walk home from church. But you had to be careful because we always wore our Sunday best. And so that was a fun memory. We remember him ringing the bell, and as this touched on, a lot of you probably have not paid attention to the bell outside. Anybody not paid attention and seen that bell on our Ebenezer rock? That was built by Charlie Cruz and his 2 sons, Brian, my son-in-law, and Jonathan. Now, all the members got a rock. We wrote our names and our Bible verse on it, and then they were built into the Ebenezer rock. I think most of the Bible verses and names have been washed off, but it's still there, so you need to be sure you check it out one day if you hadn't paid attention. Granddad did ring the bell. Kendall rang the bell for our 70th anniversary, and so they took the little clanger out because they didn't want the kids ringing it every Sunday morning or all day long. So you need to check out our Ebenezer rock. Highlights were Easter and the children's choir. We had our little choir robes, and we sang the Hosanna chorus with the adult choir. And Easter morning, all us little girls, we got our new dresses, our hats, our gloves, our new patent leather shoes, and our new pocketbooks. And boy, we were something else when we came to church on Sunday morning. Lisa's listening. So then summertime was a week of Bible school. We waited outside till it was time to go in. Then everybody got in a line, and we go in singing Onward Christian Soldiers. Then we would do our flag salute, our pledge to the flag, the Christian flag, the pledge to the Bible. And then Mother's Day, all of our mothers were recognized. Now, as you've heard, Ms. Owen always got the most children. But then she would always get the oldest, and my grandmother, Edna Prevette, was just a few months younger. But we always picked on grandmother because she always lost to Ms. Owen every year. So that was a fun time too. Christmas was always special. We always had our candlelight service, and we didn't have the little protective things on our candles. We were just kids having a good time with our candles, and your mom's like, don't drip wax on the floor and don't set somebody's hair on fire. So we always remember that. And then the Sunday before Christmas, all the children were given a speech earlier to learn for the program. So they would all get up on stage and say their speech. And then the adults had the Christmas play. And I was talking to several people about things we remember, and the treat bags. I don't know if any of you know what a treat bag is, but it was a brown paper bag, and we had fruit and candy and gum. And that was always a big thing, and all the kids got their treat bag. My cousin, there were 4 kids in their family, and he said, we had enough fruit to last us for a month when all 4 of them came home with their treat bags that Sunday. So we had song services every month. No preaching, just singing your favorite song. And you would raise your hand with your hymn number, and we would sing hymns all night long. And sometimes we would have testimonies, but it was just a fun time of singing. And we supported our church completely with just our tithes and offerings. So there was only one paid position, that was the preacher. And that meant that every family had a week to clean the church. You were assigned a week to clean the church. Now, the church was never locked then. So whenever it's convenient, you go clean the church. I remember I always dusted. Somebody was telling me they thought they remembered vacuuming sometimes. And then in the summertime, the men were given a week to mow the grass. And I think my husband and Steve Trogdon teamed up on their week. And when you'd get to church on Sunday and the grass is kind of high, you just kind of laughed and thought, wonder who forgot to mow the grass this week. So that was a fun time too. And we had teams of 2 ladies that were called deaconess. And our job was to get food for the bereaved families. We didn't just feed one meal. We fed the entire time until the day of the funeral. We fed 2 meals a day. Sometimes we could be on that phone all day long getting volunteers to bring food for the families. And then we would decorate the church for different occasions. We did the communion, but then once we moved to the larger facility, it was a bigger job to decorate, so more people were helping. Well, when Mr. Maitland, he was a former missionary. When he came, he stressed the importance of supporting our missionaries. And while he was here is when Tom Trogdon started the Boys Brigade. And all the boys loved that. And we used to hear stories. They went on a camping trip one day to a little western town called Love Valley up close to Statesville. This is where we used to take our horses and ride. But they got up that morning and the water in their bowls was frozen. So Foster Owen, he breaks that water up and he starts washing off with it. And the boys are kind of in a panic, like, oh, are we going to have to do this? And so were some of the leaders, but they didn't make them take their bath that morning. So, and then later on, Ms. Maitland started the Pioneer Girls. And that was, we always had a mother-daughter banquet, and Winnie Clemmer would always bring long-stem, beautiful yellow roses for the girls to present to their moms. So that was always a fun day. And then when Ken Hash was here, and he's told me just today that he didn't remember this, but I think it's come back to him. Somebody had the idea to start a men's softball team. Yeah. Well, when I was writing my notes, I was commenting to my husband, and I said, well, y'all weren't any good, but you had a good time. And he said, we won some games, and we weren't that bad. I said, okay, I'll tell them that. So they did win some games and had a good time. And one Sunday, Kim was in our old church, obviously, and he's sitting there and he's just preaching away. And all of a sudden, we see this little reflection thing going all over his chest. It's going up and down and making circles and everything. And it seems a child had caught the sun's reflection and was sending it all over Ken. And we're all looking around, and actually his parents are still attending Meadowview. He's going somewhere else now. But that was really kind of funny that morning, because we're like, okay, who's doing that? And when their parent finds out, it's not going to be good. So after Ken left then, our pulpit committee met every week. And I don't remember the name, but there was a gentleman that he was invited to come and to speak to us and guide us in our research. So he told us in order for Meadowview to grow, we had to open our hearts and open our doors to new people. So I got to thinking, apparently most of our growth had just been from marriages and children born to the charter families, you know. So that was what we did, and we eventually called Gary Cox to be our pastor, and we definitely started growing. And suddenly, we're having 3 services every Sunday morning. Gary's our only pastor, so he's preaching 3 times on Sunday morning. And Jan, his wife, was our organist and piano player, so she's doing the music for 3 services. And I used to pick on Gary, and I told him there was no way that he could preach at the Easter sunrise service at the beach that our family always went to, because I said, Gary, before you get through, we're all going to be washed away. So later on, my daughter Annette, and there was this new guy coming to Meadowview named Brian Cruz, and they were asked to play Mary and Joseph in the Christmas program. So the next thing we know, Mary and Joseph, also known as Annette and Brian, are dating and then married. So Jordan, who is Brian's nephew, he was so excited because he'd always had a small family. And now he's got this big family, and he's related to half the people at Meadowview. He's like, oh, I'm related to the Clemmers and all the Prevettes. And he starts naming all these people that he's related to. So he was supposed to come and tell one of his stories with a skateboard accident going through a window at the supper one night at the old church, that he had been told a couple times, don't be riding the skateboard here on the sidewalk, and something happened and it just went right through the window and down on top of the food table. So, but his mom, Jan, said that her funny story about Jordan was one Sunday, Gary had taken him to breakfast, and everybody else was at home, so Gary took Jordan home, and Jan, he left for church, and then Jan went to church, and she's sitting there playing the piano, and she realizes Jordan's not in church. He's not with Robert, and he's not with any of his other friends. So when we stand up to greet people, she asked Gary where he is, and Gary had taken him home. Well, she had to wait till the singing and everything was over, so then she went home, and Jordan said, well, I was in my bedroom, and I know I'm not supposed to watch TV, but I was watching that little black and white TV, and he didn't realize everybody had left. And so he said, I went through the house, and everybody was gone, and I cried. So I went to the basement, and nobody was down there, and I cried. And then I went outside, and I cried again, and then I thought, hey, I can watch the color TV. So he goes back inside to watch the color TV. Lee was telling me a while ago, somebody asked him one day, when did you first come to Meadowview? And he gave him his date of birth, and I said, well, I guess technically some of us came before we were ever born. My mom, Lisa, was telling me her mom was expecting her and fell down the steps at church. And her sister says that's what's Lisa's problem now. Obviously, I was coming before I was born, some of the Clemmers, so that's kind of unique. And like I said earlier, we all enjoyed walking home from church with Granddaddy. One lady I was talking to the other day, she remembers one Sunday in particular, and the whole back row of teens were very talkative, and Gary just continues with his sermon and then proceeds to call them out. And they were so involved in their conversations, they didn't even realize that he was telling them basically, shut up so I can do my preaching. And this lady said she was so glad that for some reason she wasn't sitting back there that Sunday morning. And we had another gentleman who remembered that his stomach was not really hipped on big breakfast. But that Sunday morning for Easter, he had really enjoyed breakfast, and he kept telling his mother, my stomach doesn't feel right, but then you sit down and you be quiet. And so when he lost his breakfast, she realized that he really was not feeling well. I was trying to read the rest of my notes, but I do have, Mr. Meatling and Ken Hash, our Sunday school material for several quarters called for us to meet leaders of our church. And the one Sunday, Pastor Meatling was in there, and he said, "Or do you have any more questions about what we do?" And this one little girl, he said, "Do you have any more questions about what pastors do?" And this one little girl raised her hand, and she said, "Cows and horses stay in them." So, and then Ken, when he was here, Ken was here, he was in, that picture I think was in our book like in 1982. And, okay, Ken, another one of Homer Curry. He was our Sunday school superintendent, and he was in our book in 1972. And Sarah Hudson, Lisa's mom, was our treasurer in 1986. This was some of our kids in Sunday school, and our organist, Eugene McCrary. That was another. Church was, the people were all family, whether you were blood related or not. And one of my cousins, her mom always sang in the choir, so she decided she wanted to sing in the choir. So she went to choir practice, and Eugene said, "Tamara, your mother has a beautiful voice, but you can't carry a tune." So she decided maybe the choir wasn't where she was called to be. But, and that, the one picture, Andy Clammer is looking at my cousin Sherry, and Annette, my daughter, is behind him in the burgundy. Sam Garwood is the tallest one there in the middle. Ryan Curry beside of him, Homer and Linda's son. Glenna Owen, and my cousin Sherry Prevette there in the blue jumper, and then behind Andy is Chris Hall. His family attended here, and his mother eventually, after his dad passed away, she became a missionary. And then I think that's Josh Swicegood and Amy Owen. I don't know if Amy's in here now. Amy's in the middle. And one of Randy and Lisa's, is that Daniel? I think. That was one of our pictures, oh, I see our names now, that we took for our book that I took apart, okay? All right, and these were just candid pictures. I was using up my film because I'd already taken all of our leaders. Hazel Morris and my mom, Winnie Clammer and Nancy Owen. I think Lisa's on one of those. She's looking. All right, and Eddie Swicegood and my grandmother, Edna Prevette. And then my granddaddy, Simon Prevette. And Jack, and that was Travis Tysinger also. So, is that all of mine? So, anyway, we had a book, and several people had said they didn't remember. This was our book that we did at our 70th anniversary. That's got a lot of the pictures that were shown tonight, the charter member rolls and everything. My mom had copies of those, so she kept all that stuff, and I now have it. But anyway, that's just kind of my memories from Meadowview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on for the word. I got something for you. Not that one. So just as a thank you, Kitty Lanier, grandchild of charter members Simon and Edna Prevette, thank you for helping us remember God's faithfulness.
Well,
so just
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
It's beautiful.
Good. I hope you enjoy it. Appreciate you very much. Yes,
Thank you.
Are you going, Randy?